All right, let's get right into this one. I want you to picture rural Georgia, way back in 1847. You know, the air is just thick and heavy with humidity, fog hanging low over the cotton fields. It looks peaceful, right? But underneath that surface, something truly nightmarish is happening, all centered around one man and his horrifying secret. So our story really kicks off with a cotton merchant, a guy named Charles Dennison. He's just doing his thing, stops to water his horse by a small plantation, and he hears that all too familiar bell calling people to the fields. But then, something catches his eye and just stops him cold. He sees children working, which sadly wasn't unusual. But these children, they were different. They had pale skin and, as he put it, features that were unmistakably European. Now, you've got to understand, Dennison was no abolitionist. He'd made his living from the system of slavery. But what he saw, it just didn't sit right with him. It was deeply, deeply unsettling. He knew he couldn't just ride on by. So, pretending he's there to talk about buying cotton, he goes up to the owner of the plantation, a man named Horace Crawford. He just had to know what was going on. And this, right here, is the moment everything changes. That veneer of Southern charm is about to get ripped away, and what's underneath is a calculated, monstrous truth that will shake Dennison to his absolute core. So, you'd think Crawford would be secretive, right? Nope. The man is actually proud of it. He lays it all out for Dennison, talking about his breeding program with this chilling, business-like tone, like he's talking about cattle. He's been systematically fathering children with enslaved women to produce lighter-skinned offspring because, in his twisted view, they were more valuable. And just look at the scale of this. We're not talking about a tragic one-off situation. We're talking about 17 of his own children that Horace Crawford had fathered and was holding in bondage. To him, they weren't family. They were an investment. They were a workforce. So you're probably asking, how on earth did he justify this? Well, in his mind, and frankly, under the law of the time, it was simple. They were his property. The women, his own children, they were no different than his land or his livestock. He believed he had the absolute, unquestionable right to control their bodies, their lives, their futures. As he told Dennison, they just don't have the luxury of refusal. And for Charles Dennison, this was it. This was the breaking point. Look, he'd lived with the brutalities of slavery his whole life. But this was different. This systematic, cold-blooded business of breeding your own children for profit, that crossed a line he just couldn't ignore. He knew right then and there, he had to do something. But what could he do? He realized pretty quickly that the law wasn't on his side. As horrifying as it was, what Crawford was doing wasn't actually illegal. So if he couldn't find justice in a courtroom, he was going to have to find it somewhere else. He'd have to find it in the shadows, with a network of resistance. And that's how he found his way to the Underground Railroad, through a doctor he knew, a man named William Preston. Now, of course, this wasn't a real railroad with tracks and trains. It was this incredible secret web of people, abolitionists, Quakers, free black families, all working together. They used coded language, they had secret routes and safe houses, and they risked literally everything, their lives, their freedom, to help guide people to the North. So Dennison's role in all this? He became a spy. His job as a merchant was the perfect cover. He kept visiting Crawford's plantation, acting like he was still negotiating a cotton deal, but what he was really doing was mapping the whole place out, learning the routines, the layout, everything. He even managed to set up a secret line of communication with a woman inside named Rebecca, passing messages with things as simple as a blue ribbon tied to a fence. Okay, so the intelligence is gathered, the contact is made. Now the network starts to put together a plan. And let me tell you, this was not going to be easy. This was shaping up to be one of the most daring, most dangerous rescue missions they had ever attempted. And the stakes just get higher. We're talking about 6 people who are ready to make a run for it, including Crawford's own 13-year-old son, Thomas. But then the clock starts ticking, and fast. Word gets out that Crawford has decided to sell Thomas, and the sale's in 1 month. They have less than 30 days to pull off a flawless escape. Okay, so check out how intricate this plan was. It all hinged on the monthly supply run to Savannah. Step 1. A deputy who was in on it would stop the wagon and hold up the overseer for hours with some bogus, made-up inspection. Step 2, while that's happening, that's the window, the 6 of them are whisked away to a nearby safe house. And then, step 3, when night falls, a conductor from the railroad meets them and guides them to the first real stop on their journey north. Every piece had to work perfectly. And it worked. The plan actually worked. But escaping the plantation was just the beginning. Their real journey was just starting. For 18 days, they traveled north, hiding in the day, moving only at night, hiding in cellars and barns on back roads, dealing with hunger, exhaustion, and just the constant gut-wrenching fear of being caught. Until finally, after 18 days, they made it. They crossed the border into the free state of Ohio. So 6 people made it to freedom. But the story is far from over, because an act like this, it creates ripples. It set off a chain reaction that would have massive consequences for everybody, for the people who escaped, for the people left behind, and especially for the man who thought he was completely untouchable. And this is really a tale of 2 different outcomes. Up north, the stories of the escapees get published in abolitionist newspapers. Suddenly, everyone knows about the Georgia breeder. Crawford becomes infamous. But back on the plantation, Crawford is enraged, and he takes it out on those who are still there. Just on a suspicion that she might have helped, he sells a woman named Susan away from her own children, just to make a point, just as an act of pure, brutal retaliation. The fallout from this really did change every single life it touched. Let's look at what happened. For Horace Crawford, it was the end. His reputation was destroyed. He became a social outcast and eventually had to sell his plantation and just leave. For Charles Dennison, it cemented his new purpose in life. He went all in on the abolitionist cause. And for those who escaped, it was a new beginning. Thomas, the boy who almost got sold, grew up to be a carpenter in Ohio with a family of his own. And Hannah, she became this powerful voice for the movement, traveling and sharing her story to fight the system that once owned her. And the ripple effects of this one case went on for decades. It actually led to a new law in Georgia, which they called the Crawford Act. Now, let's be real, this law was minimal. It offered very little protection and was almost never enforced. But the fact that it even existed was huge. It was a tiny crack in a legal wall that saw people as property. It was a faint admission of humanity. And beyond the law, Dr. Preston's journals were published, giving us this incredible historical record. And of course, the most powerful ripple of all, the descendants of those 6 people grew up as free American citizens, generations of them. But maybe the most powerful legacy of all comes from another one of Crawford's children, a woman named Martha. She got her freedom after the Civil War and later wrote an autobiography. And in it, she says this about her father and her life. "That's my revenge. That's my victory. Living well, living free." I mean, wow. Her ultimate victory wasn't about hate or getting even. It was just this simple, beautiful, defiant act of living a good life, a free life. And in doing that, she made sure his legacy of ownership died, while the legacy of those who endured, that lived on.